All right.
Hey, we're live. All right.
We got our special guest.
Yeah, our guest didn't show up. This isn't like the 508 episode either. We literally don't know where our special guest is. We were supposed to have Judy Brewer on with us today, and she stood us up so far. I mean, hopefully she'll show up.
Maybe that's 508 refresh kidnapped her.
Ooh, there's a conspiracy going on now. All right, good stuff.
Well, at least we have Mike.
We have Mike Paciello, and
he signed the check, so it's really like, it's good that he showed up.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good time with Mike. And he dressed
I was wearing a suit.
He dressed for the occasion, which is great.
Yes, so did we. Clearly, dressed for the occasion.
Yeah, I'm wearing pants. If I stood up right now, you would actually see jeans.
That's good. Mike, you got a little something on your tie there. I want to take a look.
Exactly. What is that? Looks good to me, buddy. Oh, that's called a bow.
A bow?
No.
The only bows I know are the beers that I drink. Hey, so we're about what? We're only about 5 hours left in the day here. We have 5 sessions left, including this one. So, what do you guys think of ID24 so far? Favorite sessions? Let's play favorites for a minute.
Phenomenal. I think it's really been. Oh, hi!
There. Whew. We were getting worried there for a minute. We thought we got stood up. We thought, Judy, that you had done the world's greatest troll job on us and pretended that you were going to come on and they just left us hanging.
She's there, but she's not speaking.
She's not speaking.
She's still muted. Oh, I hear her way in the background, but garbled. There you are.
Your audio is a little messed up.
Maybe to put the talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
We can't.
We can't hear you at all, Judy. You're muffled in the back.
Okay, is this any better?
Nope.
Okay, let me mess with that. Why don't you chat amongst yourselves and everybody else watching?
Deep within the basement.
Anyway, so it's okay.
Yeah.
I heard she's going to fix it. We should chat
going.
amongst ourselves while she listens to it. Okay.
Deep within the basements of MIT with her red swingline stapler, and
Hey, so getting back though to ID24, there have been some awesome sessions. I probably have a predisposition. I really enjoyed Kel's session. Of course, the Sony session, even with the video glitches, still was very cool, just as was Bryce Johnson's last night, which I also thought was fantastic. The whole fact that we've had a nice gaming accessibility flavor to this year's ID24, we haven't done it in the past, and we still have Ian Hamilton come up. I think it was really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the viewer numbers have been great this year, consistent all throughout the whole thing. The variety of talks, the quality of the talks has been just phenomenal, and I'm really happy about how things have turned out. So.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I haven't. I mean, I'm a gamer myself. I didn't know that much about what was out there for accessible gaming, and hearing Bryce's talk last night was amazing. Just seeing some of the features that are built into Xbox that I mean, me and a lot of other people just didn't know existed. And then seeing this stuff that Naughty Dog's been doing today with Uncharted 4 is just phenomenal. Like I said earlier, like some of the features they've added will make gaming easier for a lot of people, not just those with disabilities. But what they're doing for those with disabilities is amazing. I think there was one part of the video where one of the gamers said that. They said, in the video game, I'm not in this chair anymore. I'm jumping around, I'm shooting, I'm doing all this really cool stuff. So I thought that was fantastic, and it's really cool.
So, by the way,
hey, there you are. Good.
Yeah, happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day.
Thank you. We can hear you now.
Yeah. Adjusted something over here.
That's good.
That's good. All right.
So happy to join you.
All right. So So back in March at a little camp that we all go to called CSUN. Little small gathering of 5,000-6,000 people. Karl and I gave this crazy little talk called Why WCAG.
Yeah.
And we discussed like issues developers had with sort of parsing info from the doc. It was, fairly well received. And after that, Judy actually came up to us, and I think you had the quote of the event, Judy, which was, I'll let you say it. It sounds better
Yeah,
than you
well,
say it.
actually, that was before the event ended. And by the way, you had compliments on a really nice turnout in your session. So I think what I was saying was, it's really hard to make a technical standard entertaining, and it's important to happen because we want, and you guys managed to do that very well. So, it's really important that people know about and use the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines because it's critical for removing barriers for people with disabilities when we're using the web. And so, every way to get the message out there, we appreciate.
Well,
yeah, and we like to, I think we've mentioned this before to people that have gone to our talks or have talked to us like after that we really want to try to make accessibility accessible, and that was also, I think, probably why, we wanted to have you on here because you are somebody who represents, the organization that creates all these standards, right? And so, there's this resource that everybody has to go to. It's W3 Schools, and it's very
What's that, Karl? What's that? You talking about W3C?
Oh,
that's the one. That's
oh.
All right, that sounds more familiar.
We had to
we
promise we would only say that once.
But I do want to ask you, in all seriousness, that's got to be annoying, right? The fact that the two are so similar, and then when someone searches for something, that's the first thing that shows up. Like, it annoys me. I know that much.
I think it does in some, perhaps in some search engines. I think if you search for Web Accessibility Initiative, you'll land on a ton of good resources about web accessibility, including the standards such as WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and also other standards we've done, such as like the Authoring Tool Accessibility Guidelines and stuff. So it may be that the safe bet is to search for WAI for WAY. You can throw W3C in there too, but we don't get too annoyed about any of that though.
And you lead the way. Was that on purpose? Did you guys create that?
So I'm the director of the Way, and we have and just incredibly huge and diverse community that comes and helps us build things, and contributes ideas and helps build consensus approaches to things, and that turns into some useful resources out there, and we welcome everybody to come and join into that.
Is consensus overrated?
Well, I think consensus is one of those things that's sort of sometimes hard to get at in life, and particularly when you have a group of like passionate advocates for accessibility,
right,
and you have different people thinking like, I know the right way to do it, and it's like, well, that person thinks they know the right way to do it, and then you have to sometimes work hard to get people listening to each other carefully, and some people who've been working on stuff for a long time may think like, oh, we figured it out, but it's still important to really hear the kind of feedback we're getting from people who are newer to the area. One of the things we try to do is to try to make sure there's representation from different parts of the community, so different stakeholders in a way, and sometimes those communities may not have talked as directly with each other before, and so that's sort of a learning process at first. But there are people who are using this stuff to develop websites. There are people who are using this stuff to evaluate whether websites conform. There are people who are taking it up in policy in different ways, and they want to have something clear they can point to, but they don't worry about how practical it is for people and everything. So we try to listen to all the different perspectives, and then we try to reach consensus on what is a way to balance the different interests of agility and stability and all that good stuff. Sometimes it takes a while to work through that and make sure that people are listening to each other well.
And I think a lot of people don't realize is how much you really do listen to the community. And there's various ways that they can participate and offer their criticism or input along the way. So I mean, what are the different ways that people, who might just be subscribing, what are different ways that they can contribute, or how can they reach out there?
Yeah, I really appreciate your question, Billy, because we've tried to make sure that there's a range of different ways so that people can participate according to their interest level, or whether they're in W3C or just checking it out or what. And one of those is anything we're developing, we do that in public, and we invite and we count on getting comment on that. And so, like, if you're on the Way interest group list and you see a notice of something coming out in a draft for review, that's a really serious invitation for review. If we don't get feedback, we're not going to be able to come up with something that's going to work for what your specific needs are, because we can't guess what all those are necessarily. And then some people join lists to kind of watch the discussion. Some people join the working group lists, or join the working group or a task force of it officially, and then they're taking on some responsibility to keep up with the discussion, to respond in a courteous, respectful way or whatever when feedback is going back and forth, to contribute suggestions, proposals, and then kind of have the patience to follow through in the dialogue on that, and then to be able to maybe occasionally modify the initial thinking according to feedback and come up with something in the end that's a useful global resource. And then on some of our work, like the authoring tool accessibility guidelines or the user agent accessibility guidelines, we're looking for very specific help implementing things. And on the testing work, we're doing that too. There was some other thought I had on that I want to come back to in a minute, but we try to make sure there's a range of ways to participate. And what you can do, you can go to any particular working group page we have, look at the section that says how to participate, and there'll be staff contact there. If you have questions, you can weigh in there.
Now, is there? So here's my question. We talked about you talked about the authoring tool accessibility guidelines.
Yeah.
There's the user agent accessibility guidelines. There's the web content accessibility guidelines. But where does AT fit in, and what is the what is the contribution that AT vendors have or haven't had, and is there a need for them to have some guidelines to adhere to? The Assistive Technology Connection is primarily to the user agent accessibility guidelines, because that's where we pay the most attention to interoperability between mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream browsers and quote unquote the assistive technology stuff. And sometimes there's less separation between that than there might have been in the past. But so that we have some provisions that have to do with interoperability, but we didn't create specific requirements on assistive technologies, because you get into a real feasibility challenge with some of that. And that's because, there's so many different functional needs around, different kinds of functional needs around disability. And so there are assistive technologies that are targeted at, sometimes very specific issues that are gap issues that no one else is covering. And it would be very challenging for them to have to do the entirety of every cross-disability issue. But on the other hand, it's still a great advantage when they do, because when you get assigned disabilities, you don't necessarily get assigned just one at a time, as many of us in the community have discovered. Darn. So we do give some attention to that, but it wasn't as primary a thing that we were trying to address as we did with the user agent accessibility guidelines. But by the way, a lot of people, one of the myths about our work, I think, is a lot of the people don't realize that the user agent accessibility guidelines were completed as a W3C note, not a standard. But the thing that was missing was full, completely tested implementation information. But we actually found that it was pretty broadly implemented on a feature-by-feature basis, just not all in one browser. And we continue to hear from the disability community very strongly that people can't get enough of the comprehensive baseline accessibility in any one browser right now. We'd love to have an opportunity to, help work more with the
current development approach of some of the browsers to help find ways to advance the newer capabilities, or make it more comprehensive accessibility in each browser.
Right, but I mean, there's still this gap, I think, sometimes with some of the assistive technologies in terms of what they support, or I mean, and then some of them aren't even really, I guess, intended to be assistive technologies. The one thing I constantly think of is Dragon, Naturally Speaking, which has a massive user base of people with motor control disorders and stuff like that. But they've only recently started to be supporting some ARIA stuff, or some stuff that I view as regressions within VoiceOver that have happened recently. And I know that, you know, in industry, you know, vendors need to steer their product features, you know, towards whatever, you know, basically wherever money's coming from or whatever. But I almost feel like we see browser vendors heavily involved in the development of web standards, but not the assistive technology vendors. So, like, for instance, you know, Microsoft Edge, those guys on the Edge team have made massive progress recently about Microsoft Edge's support for accessibility, but still, like, where is everybody else? Like, where are the assistive technology vendors in that whole process?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think some of that, from my perspective, has to do with the economics or the business model. A lot of assistive technology developers are relatively smaller businesses, and so they have a real challenge supporting accessibility on multiple platforms when there's not a common API. We've gotten a number of requests to get more involved in helping support development of a kind of intermediate level API between some of the, you know, mainstream browser stuff and some of the assistive technology, and that's still something we may get back into. There's a whole history of organizations trying that and failing, but there's some possibilities that W3C would be kind of neutral enough, and again, consensus-oriented space to try it in. So who knows? We would be open to that. But I think there's small and medium-sized companies, and there could be more engagement. What you're saying about speech recognition, yeah, there's huge opportunities to get that even more accessible. And speech recognition is used by people with a lot of different kinds of disabilities, you know, including dyslexia and stuff, as well as motor difficulties.
We've had a lot of talks today. Sorry, Karl. We had a lot of talks today talking specifically about WCAG. And one of them in particular was about sort of what comes next in WCAG. So we wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, WCAG next. Obviously, there's a lot of sort of it's split between, do we expand the doc, do we extend the doc, and there's obviously pros and cons to both. What's your feeling on sort of where it's heading and what the best approach might be?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. And I think of it in terms of, I'm getting a lot of echo right now. As long as it's not coming through to you guys and the rest of the folks, it's okay, I guess. But I see it in terms of like short next and longer term next, or another way to phrase it is WCAG next, which is kind of what's happening now, and then maybe a way 3.0 after that or so. But anyway. We're very aware that there are some areas we didn't cover as much as we would have liked to with WCAG 2.0, and that we couldn't really at the time in some ways, because there's a research stage, there's particularly in the cognitive area, then there's like some looking at the specificity, like how precisely can something be stated so that it would be testable, perhaps, and then there's a feasibility of, like, you know, are all of the ideas implementable, and anything we put out, we have to make sure people can do it, because otherwise that's a kind of catch-22. So in the cognitive and learning disability area and in the low vision area, there's definitely space to at least be exploring whether we can add some new normative stuff. And so we had started talking about it in the terms of extensions. And when that idea had first come around, a lot of people really liked that, because they were trying to balance the evolution or agility of the spec and some stability. and they thought, okay, here's going to be this clear core, and then we can start adding some things, and then eventually roll that in. That was always part of what we were thinking about, some eventual roll-in possibilities. Then the discussion for a while centered on, well, the extensions might give this really strange impression that this community's needs aren't as important in some way, or that community's needs aren't, and that was never the intention. But we understood that was for some people a really sensitive point. And then there was also the mobile stuff that we wanted to add a few provisions and make some of the stuff clearer. And there's thoughts about how well does that fit this extension thing when almost all of what's in WCAG applies to mobile as well. And there's some things that need to be added maybe, but not a huge amount. So in any case, we've recently the WCAG working group. Sorry, there's a bit involved. I'll wrap up. But the working group has recently had an updated discussion and put out a proposal maybe a week and a half ago to say, this is what we think we want to do going forward on this near-term stuff. And it actually, I think, has still some space for developing things in extension containers, but then more deliberately saying, this is how we plan to roll things in to a WCAG 2.1. So that's one dimension of it. And I think people are really eager to work on that. And then there's the further off stuff, but I'll stop for a minute here. I don't know if Mike wants to get a word in here, too, anywhere.
No,
I'm afraid if we get him started.
Yeah,
he's just watching.
So just in that period of time, you just outlined a whole bunch of things that that seem to be reasons why things aren't moving faster, and things honestly probably didn't move faster with WCAG 2, right? So, for some history for those who don't know, WCAG 1 had just reached final recommendation status, and 2, Wendy and some of the earlier people in the way started working on 2 immediately, and it took up to 2008 to get that done. And so I guess the fear that a lot of people have is, are we going to have these things happen again where we need to wait and to go forward? In other words, you had talked just a second ago about having things be more agile. And you just, happily, I think I heard 2.1 in there somewhere, but anyway.
You did, yeah.
And the thing about it is, like, okay, so what is that going to look like? How long is that going to take? And are we going to be able to iterate on minor versions in a way that's realistic, that is also keeping pace with technology and stuff like that? And then, of course, like you said, even further down the road, like, what does a 3 look like? You know what I mean?
So let me try to address your question on that. One of the things that there was kind of a mini ad hoc task force thing that had short-term spun out of the WCAG discussions, and they were looking at exactly the question you're worried about, like, how does this map against a calendar, and how long do we have to wait for stuff? Yeah. So first, there have been 3 task forces under WCAG for a year or more, cognitive and learning disability, low vision, and mobile. And some of the work in the task forces is getting pretty mature, particularly the mobile group, by the way. If you're interested in that, I invite you to look at it, please. We'd love your feedback. And so then they were looking a lot at the question of timeline. And I'm going to pull this from memory from skimming what I saw of the proposal. I think that it popped up like a week ago. I think they were looking at something like 9 months to mature the input that they're expecting at the 2.1, and then we have to do implementation testing on everything. Anybody who comes to the table to help on implementation testing is going to help accelerate getting this stuff essentially proven, so we can take it to proposed recommendation, and then to the final standard. And we also have to make sure that everybody agrees, which is takes a little. It's a wild card on the calendar.
If you've ever been on a W3C call, that's the easy part, really.
You wish, yeah. The 2.1 stuff, they have a proposed timeline, I believe, in that proposal. So it's not like a mega multi-year thing. However, what we're trying to get to as soon as we can is some of the follow-on work. One of the reasons we were worried about a near-term commitment to a full update of WCAG is because we feel, well, I'll speak for myself here, I feel we may already be behind the curve on a much more comprehensive rework of this that actually more realistically addresses the fact that everything is converging onto the web, and we shouldn't just be thinking about this little batch of traditional PC website stuff. In W3C, we're dealing with digital publishing, we're dealing with Web of Things, we're dealing with automotive navigation system accessibility, and passenger side accessibility. We're dealing with, media, TV on the web, all these different areas, and we're responsible for trying to help get all these new areas accessible, and also make sure there's good guidance for that. And so, and why is user agent and authoring tools still so separate? Don't we need to be planning for something rolled together? So we do expect that to take some collective revisioning, and we do want to make sure that the working group has space to be starting on that as well. That's going to take a bit longer, Hopefully not 8 years, though. Hopefully like 2 or 3.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned all of these different groups working together, but I mean, there's also a bigger picture where now we've got all of these different worldwide standards that are sort of kicking around. So, I mean, how do we plan on sort of harmonizing them at some point, or is there a talk of how we can sort of get sort of a global harmonization going for all these standards and sort of operate under one umbrella instead of all over the place?
Well, we're pretty encouraged, actually, at what the uptake has been, and I'm not sure if you're talking about technical standards right now or policy uptake of technical standards. Billy, let me
sure. Let's fix internet across the board. But yeah, I was thinking more the technical standards I see.
Okay. So there are technical standards that are popping up in different areas on specific pieces of technology, but sometimes we're having people come along and saying we would have confidence in the approach being used at W3C. I don't know if you noticed a week or so ago there was an announcement of a potential merger between the International Digital Publishing Forum, IDPF, and W3C. The two organizations have been collaborating for several years now on a few interest groups and working groups, and it's been going pretty well. And the digital publishing area has an incredible accessibility community, and EPUB work is heavily based on the very strong accessibility portions of W3C standards. So they're actually, there's an exploration. It's not definite yet, but we're looking at them coming into W3C and collaborating directly with us internally. And a number of other areas have actually said that they're choosing to develop their standards under W3C. It's a great opportunity for the accessibility work to say, how can we help? Because the expectation, both from people with disabilities and sometimes organizations that set requirements and stuff, is, hey, this technology stuff should work for people with disabilities too. And we want to have a voluntary consensus standard, that we can count on.
So what are you, at a high level, what are the, circling back to the Internet of Things and the web payments and the Internet on TV, like what is the activity there that the way is directly involved in?
So the way we would usually work on something like that is a lot of work at W3C gets incubated now in community groups first, and then they'll narrow down what their specific proposal is, and then you get something like a payments interest group or payments working group or whatever. And what we try to do is we have one working group. We have a lot of working groups in Way, so there's a flavor for anybody who wants to join and help out. So one of our groups is sort of the geekier one, the geekiest one or whatever, is a group of people, the Accessible Platform Architecture Group, and they constantly are looking across every technology being developed at W3C, and they're saying, is there an accessibility barrier? Is there an accessibility opportunity? Are there specific issues? They raise those to the group then, and then sometimes they'll try to get a liaison who has kind of dual expertise, like really well grounded in accessibility and really well grounded in payments. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of folks who have that dual expertise, but there are some.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like you look at Katie Harito Shea is one person who has both of the backgrounds, and so she's been a wonderful liaison into the payments area. Mm-hmm. And ideally, we try to get a few people who can help specify user requirements.
Right.
It's like tedious stuff to do, but it's critical because then the working group folks that like in the TV and web, they were like, what do you mean accessibility? And we were like, oh, let's develop use cases. And we developed the use cases. They were like, oh, this is incredible. We'd love to tackle this.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now that's
sorry to get excited about this.
That's good though.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
Because I think that those user stories really are going to help inform the evolution of the standard. I mean, just going back to like sort of the agile stuff from traditional software development is the user story lines up the tasks, and so if you don't have a user story, then you don't really and for one, you're not actually meeting your users' requirements if you don't have a user story that you can describe well. And from an accessibility perspective, those accessibility features are never going to make it in if we don't have a user that we're trying to target for that. So that's really cool. But so if we go back to WCAG for a moment and talk about because one of the things that sort of brought, I guess, this session together, at least on Bill and I's side, was first it was like, oh wow, we really actually didn't make Judy mad.
It's like, we have to nurture this relationship.
Exactly. Like we can really, drive that one home and really make friends. But the other thing was that we have had, there have been heated conversations in the Twitterverse about statements that we made specifically around the length of WCAG, not just the standard. Of course, we know we know that the normative portion is 61 success criteria, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. But there's constant work going on techniques and improving techniques, rewording techniques. I know for instance that after our presentation, Eric Eggert tried ruining our presentation by
one of our best slides.
One of our best slides was on the conflict between two general techniques, and Eric was like, "Oh yeah," and so
I will fix this.
We will pull the rug out from under Karl and Bill. But so in terms of like the resources, like what, we know the APG is working on some stuff that are proof of concept code samples. What else is going on? Especially, listening to you talk throughout, the most of this portion, I'm getting a sense that that you guys could use some more resources.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
So what can people do?
I wasn't sure where your actual question was going, so I'm sitting over here scribbling notes on about 7 different things that you just said. Can I rewind a little bit and comment on some different? Thank you.
Welcome to my brain. That's how it goes.
Thanks. Mine does that sometimes too.
I didn't know where the plane was going to land either, Judy.
So first is, I think we're more approachable than some people think, or at least I hope we are, and we always like feedback on that too. So let us know if you think that your stuff isn't welcome. One of the things that I really liked about the presentation that I sat in on at CISA in 2016 was that you guys had a lot of specifics, like these are the parts of WCAG that are annoying you the most, and so that kind of stuff is useful for us to hear, and again, I'm going to invite you to send those things in. You might find that it might take the working group a really long time to get to that. It might end up going in something down the road more, but I would rather that we capture that than not. Or it might turn out that nobody else agrees with you. Who knows? But some of your points were getting a lot of applause, so who knows? You know. So in any case, you know, we do appreciate specifics, and we do appreciate people coming and telling us, and not assuming that we'll get mad or something, because that's not how we try to work. There are people who've been involved for a long time who are gonna feel like, oh yeah, I want to explain why we did it this way, and you know, just give them some space, because that's an important part of it too. And there may in fact be 10 good reasons not to do not to change the approach. But that's what the back and forth is about sometimes. Let me see. So you were asking what kind of resources we need. You know, people who are a lot of it is just like being willing to work hard, kind of under a structure in a group sometimes, to say, okay, this is an issue that's floating around in the discussion. I think I have an idea on how this could work better. I'll write a proposal for it, or I'll learn how to write a proposal in a way that the group has found actually works, evolve something, and then I'll be willing to edit it when people raise good points or something, or I'll be willing to help scribe a call, or I'll be willing to you know, respond to a question somebody raised in a thoughtful, careful way. That's kind of the flavor of the work. So there's work on the web content stuff, you know, particularly on the extensions that are coming in that we hope will grow up to be 2.1. There's work on the review of other specifications. There's work in the education and outreach area. One of the myths that we sometimes hear, I think, is that everybody gets accessibility now, knows what to do, and we shouldn't have to be working on education stuff. And what? Yeah, okay. So here we are in Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Right. So I think we all think that there's probably some education left to do. What we find, even if I'm talking with, you know, W3C member organizations, there's over 400 organizations. By the way, that's something people can do as well, because that helps contribute resources that support the work. We hear a lot of organizations who say, we've been hearing about all this accessibility stuff for a while, but we really need easier on-ramps to some of this. And so that's one reason we've maintained an education and outreach working group. And for people who are interested in finding additional ways to get the message out, or developing supportive materials to, you know, to help, you know, move people along once they understand the importance of it, they're doing some incredible work. And I don't know if people saw the announcement a night and a half ago, depending on. So I'm in Boston, by the way, when I say that. Yeah. But there's these perspectives videos that we just released, and that represents really hard work by the Education and Outreach Working Group, with some support from European Commission, actually, to develop these intro videos. And the message is essential for people with disabilities, useful for all. A lot of people liked that message, and they developed some, I guess we're hearing from the feedback, you know, good quality things that give a strong message about, here's why, you know, contrast matters. Here's why organization of a website helps people use the site better. And so that's another kind of work that people can do. And by the way, I hope people look at the WAI homepage, just w3.org/WAI, because that's probably the headline item now there. But, you know, we need help building that stuff, as well as building the technical things and keeping the techniques updated to the technology. Tons of different places to plug in. There's testing.
A bunch of, right, yeah. And there's a bunch of techniques that are like still like placeholders, right? That you know that there's a place for that technique that isn't actually written up. Is that
well, so I think the working group, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Working Group, is trying to focus more now on the extension stuff and trying to get to a 2.1 and trying to plan for 3.0. But they were publishing, I mean, I got to give them credit for actually accelerating their publication of updated techniques over the past few years. They went from sort of once a year to every 6 months, on the dot practically. And I think there's always more to do.
So is that a place that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. That too. and then we're getting requests for more. People say, look, when we evaluate web content accessibility, we we don't know what the definitive interpretation is. Couldn't you guys please do something authoritative? And so we're actually trying to jumpstart that work, and that's something we also need resources for. We've had several organizations with really large test rules and procedures offered to contribute those and then get a consensus version, and that's nice, but we need people to help work on that.
Okay. Now, I mean, we talked about resources you're looking for, but what about the resources that exist? I mean, you do have some great resources that are there now. Easy Checks is, I think, one that has sort of been popping up a little bit lately, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that and the resources that are there now to help someone sort of parse WCAG and navigate through it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have gotten really strong requests for the past few years for things that are easier on-ramps. And so one of those is the Easy Checks that you're mentioning. And a lot of people don't understand what those are initially, but this is for somebody who hears about accessibility and then they start worrying about their own organization's website, and they're thinking like, oh my gosh, we don't even have any evaluation of it, but I don't have the expertise to do a formal evaluation. And so Easy Checks is sort of walking you through, here's a trick you can do with your browser to find out if the headers are marked right, or here's a trick to find if our stuff is resizable. So I definitely recommend that. Another thing is there's a resource called I think Quick Tips for Accessibility. It's not the old line by line, but it's a kind of a role-based. If you're a developer, if you're a designer, what's the short list of resources you want? And a lot of people, we've gotten very nice feedback about that. So I think we're hitting some spot there.
What is oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. What is the one that Eric? What's the one that Eric Eggert was just working on that you can sort of filter WCAG and
Yeah, so that's the one I was going to talk about.
Oh,
so this is one of my favorite ones, actually. So I don't know how many people had been using the old How to Meet WCAG 2, a quick customizable reference for blah, blah, blah. It had a really long name, too. So we just completely changed the interface for that. So it's much friendlier. And so what it allows you to do is to go in and much more easily find the parts of WCAG that you need and to link to all the supporting pieces for that. And so that's one of the things that Eric Eggert was working on, and I think it came out pretty nicely. And that's the feedback we're getting.
It did for sure. Karl and I gave the Why WCAG talk actually at Accessing Higher Ground last November.
Yeah.
And then, so we did the same talk that you saw, so it was, you know what it was like. And then the next day, I sat through and watched Sean and Sharon talk about that tool, and I'm like, I feel so bad for giving the WCAG talk now because this tool is actually really great. So yeah, it was such a dick moment, but yeah.
so you're going to do a follow-up presentation now and just say we were all wrong, right? No, just kidding.
Yeah. No, we'll just find about this.
Just kidding. No, sorry, Karl, what?
I said we'll just find new stuff to poke at. That's all.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that keeps us on our toes. We need that,
It's been we've been on this for about 45 minutes now, so I'm sure that Twitter's just filled with complaints about WCAG. We could just focus on those.
We'll be able to mine it for new things to work because we were getting so bored because we thought we'd taken care of it all already.
Hey, I got one question for you. You mentioned before that you heard these crazy rumors like everybody gets accessibility now, so blah blah blah. What is the absolute craziest WCAG rumor you've ever heard that you would love to dispel right now?
I was thinking if I got this kind of question, where would I start? Because I think there are very few things that I haven't heard at some point, and I guess my main
series.
No, I guess my main message would be if you if you hear something that sounds really strange, please let us know and check it out, because I think it actually can sort of like hurt the accessibility effort in a way. But I have to assume it's all well intentioned. But we heard things like there's some promise not to update WCAG, or that that there was no implementations for the authoring tool accessibility guidelines, or and it's like, no, wow, look at the amount. We had everything tested so that it passed the implementation, authoring tool stuff passed the implementation thing. And if you look back even at our charters, we were always trying to find a way to plan for the next round of stuff. It turns out that a more near-term round was necessary, but we're always trying to balance different needs, and so sometimes there's a bunch of people who really want to push something forward. There's a bunch of people who really want stability, and it's challenging to figure out a way to balance that. But I would just say generally, if you hear something that sounds really strange, please talk to us, because a lot of times it's just like there's very different inputs coming from different directions, and we try to figure out how can we keep in a path that maintains some consensus so that our stuff will still be used by really diverse communities.
So my question, Bill asked a question. My question is,
yeah.
Can you talk to Jeff Jaffe about putting an endorsement on my LinkedIn profile?
I can pass along the request to him, but actually, we can't say a lot about either individual organizations or individuals because we have this vendor neutral.
Yeah. But I'm just trying to look out. Just looking out for me in case Mike actually fires us for one of these VNL things.
Karl, I'm a little offended because just this morning I gave you LinkedIn recommendations for Apache and VRML. So I don't know what more I can do for you, man.
Well, I see Mike sitting there in the background with a big grin on his face. I don't think you're at any big risk right now.
He's here to make sure we don't screw up. Though.
I have a feeling this was less of a hangout and more of an employee review. This was our employee review, Karl. I think
do you want to ask him questions or have him?
Hey, listen, I do want to say a couple of things though, just in relation to, an organization supporting WAG, right? And for many years, frankly speaking, we didn't. And when I say we did not, I mean we didn't get involved in sponsorship. We had very few people involved in working groups or activities and things like that. But a couple of years ago, strategically, we realized that we needed to put a stake in the ground somewhere, and we had 2 or 3 different alternatives, in directions that we could go, and we felt that the best place for us as a small company, but with some great people, that a place to throw all of our eggs, so to speak. Not all of them, but probably 90% of them was into the W3C and in the WAG activities. And I think we've gotten a lot of payback as a result of that.
We really appreciate
we're much more involved. Yeah, and we continue to do that as new folks come in. We we encourage them. I encourage them. They're, the other team members encourage everyone to get involved in some of the discussions and in the working group activities. I definitely want to see growth in research. I definitely want to see growth in the Web of Things, Internet of Things activity. I know myself, even personally, I've been following and involved in discussions with Dave Raggett and his team and on the IoT. So in that sense, even I'm trying to do some little, a little bit of activity. User experience is big for us. It's an area where we think technologically, programmatically, a lot of that can be handled because we've got people that are very smart, know how to solve some of the challenges that we've had to do. But I still feel very strongly, I know we as an organization feel very strongly, that UX and user experience is something that really, really needs to be addressed a lot more seriously within the realm of accessibility. And so a lot of inroads have been made, but there's still a lot more work to do at that level. So I think that's what you'll see us be passionate about.
I really appreciate your comment, Mike, and really appreciate the involvement, both coming in as a member, because that does help support the work, Some organizations, also come in as sponsors, and for anyone out there who's listening, who's interested in learning more about that, let me know, or let me know if people are interested in membership. There's also sometimes ways to participate if that's not an option for you, so I don't want people to feel that they can't if they're not a member, because there's so many different ways to participate. But you also put people into the groups who have a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas, including the user experience area, and that's extremely valuable for keeping, kind of goosing up the quality of the accessibility work here. So again, if there's other people who are listening on this and thinking like you want to be at the table, that's probably the main thing I would want people to take away from this, is an invitation to be at the table on developing things, and where you disagree with things, to bring that to the table in a good way, in a constructive way. We really welcome that. By the way, Mike, you were mentioning research. We're actually, some of our groups shuffled around over the past year. One of the things was that we'd had a research working group, and that's now there's a task force that we're trying to get restarted under the APA working group. And so we have a few people. Jason White with ETS is helping Shadia Puzara and myself and Michael Cooper to get a work statement going for that. And then we're going to be looking for participants, for people who want to take technical questions coming out of the APA group that's surveying all the different areas that Billy and Karl were also referring to, and saying, what are the research, what are the accessibility questions? Some of those have research questions we need to look at, sometimes quickly. So anybody's interested in that kind of stuff, look for hopefully a task force announcement in the next maybe month or two, and then come on and play.
Awesome.
Good.
All right.
Good.
We are actually out of time, so I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to take one quick minute, and I know we're going over. We're going to switch over in a couple minutes. Mike Possiello, this guy here, thanked me for something on Twitter, and I thought I really, really, really appreciate it. And so let me go into a really quick story. So 3 years ago, in early May or late April or something like that, I'm on my riding lawnmower, mowing my lawn, and ID24 was coming up, and I said, I have an idea. 24 hours of accessibility. And so I came up with this idea for ID24, and we did it, and it was awesome, and it was really last minute. Like, it was only 2 weeks away, and everybody came to the table at the Possiello group to put this thing together. And Mike just yesterday, right when we got started, Mike thanked me and sent out a tweet for this. But this year, I really want to say one thing, and that is that that again the TPG team came together to put together ID24. But this guy, this hairy monster in the bottom of the screen here, Billy Gregory, really dove in this year and led the charge. We have Patrick to thank for Patrick, and actually now Hans did some stuff on the website. Those guys did a great job. Henny and Leone, of course, dove in, but the real leader this year was Bill, and of course all of our moderators. But my hat's off especially to Bill on this. So before we go, I just want to say thank you, Billy, for making sure this went off without a hitch.
My pleasure, buddy.
Yeah, I agree.
Next year, someone else can do it, though.
Is it true that you guys don't sleep for 24 hours?
Yeah.
But Mike never sleeps anyway because he's a cyborg. But
I'm working on it. It's a team thing, guys. It's a team thing.
Yeah, Gene. It's funny. Gene Spellman.
I don't think sleeping is a team thing, Mike. I think you're doing it wrong.
No vacations, no holidays. I got it on there. It's going to be our new motto.
It was funny. I saw Gene say something yesterday about, watching from the outside. Last year, you guys made it seem so sort of easy and carefree, and it was really like, yeah, it's really hard to get all. It's like, Bill can probably tell you more than me, really, but the cat wrangling that has to go on and making sure everybody's on time, everything's got all the information they need. and all that sort of stuff. And so
24 cats into 24 boxes, man.
Thank you very much for inviting me. This is fun.
Thank you. All right. Well,
thank
see
you,
you
everybody.
guys at the next one. What's the next one, Bill?
We've got Ian Hamilton up.
Ian Hamilton.
Ian Hamilton, another gaming talk.
Amazing.
Okay, I'm going to drop off now. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See ya.
We're going to drop off too, and we'll see everybody in 5 minutes. So.
5 minutes.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.